Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Paracas Skulls, elongated heads with different DNA to any known human group. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1928, Peruvian archaeologist Julio Tello excavated a burial site on the Paracas Peninsula of southern Peru and found hundreds of mummies with dramatically elongated skulls, some with a cranial volume 25% larger than the modern human average. He identified a new pre-Inca culture. He was celebrated. His finds entered mainstream archaeology. The elongated skulls were explained as the result of intentional cranial deformation, a widespread practice across ancient cultures. 80 years later, a researcher named Brien Foerster submitted skull samples for DNA testing and announced that the results showed an unknown humanoid species, something not fully human. The story spread globally. Scientists, journalists, and governments responded. The truth turned out to be considerably more complex than either the sensational claim or the dismissive debunking suggested. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the global puzzle of unexplained ancient construction, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The sky was the original clock, calendar, and map. Before writing, before money, before cities, human beings looked up and organized their lives around what they saw. The position of the sun at solstice told them when to plant and when to harvest. The rising of specific stars marked the seasons. The phases of the moon governed ceremonial calendars in cultures from Ireland to India. Our ancestors were not casual observers of the night sky. They were meticulous, obsessive, and precise in a way that rivals modern astronomical science. This precision is encoded in stone at sites around the world. Newgrange in Ireland is aligned so precisely that sunlight enters its inner chamber only during the 5 days around the winter solstice, and it has done so every year for more than 5,000 years. The pyramids of Giza are oriented to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. Stonehenge tracks both the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter sunset, as well as the 18-6-year lunar cycle. These alignments are not accidental. They were engineered with mathematical precision by cultures we have long underestimated. What drove this obsession with celestial mechanics? Partly practical. Agriculture depends on knowing the seasons. But partly something more profound. Ancient cultures believed the sky was alive, that the movements of stars and planets determined the fates of kingdoms and harvests. In this worldview, encoding celestial cycles into permanent stone was not merely useful but sacred. The great monuments of the ancient world are, among other things, the most durable clocks ever built. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Paracas Skulls, elongated heads with different DNA to any known human group, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Paracas culture occupied the southern coast of Peru from approximately 800 to 100 BC and is one of the best-studied pre-Inca Andean civilizations. Julio Tello's 1928 excavations at the Paracas Cavernas and Paracas necropolis sites recovered more than 300 mummified bodies, many wrapped in textiles of extraordinary quality. The textiles are considered among the finest produced in the ancient Americas. The elongated skulls Tello found were initially attributed to intentional cranial deformation and catalogued accordingly. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered cranial deformation, the deliberate reshaping of an infant's skull by binding with boards or cloth during the first years of life, was practiced across many ancient cultures in the Americas, Eurasia, and Oceania. The practice works because infant skull bones are not yet fully fused. Applied pressure over time can significantly alter skull shape, elongating or flattening it in ways that persist into adulthood. Deformation changes the shape of existing skull plates, but does not alter the number of skull bones or add new parietal plates. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Brien Foerster, an author and tour guide specializing in Peruvian ancient sites, commissioned DNA analysis of Paracas skull samples in 2013 through an anonymous laboratory whose identity he declined to publicly disclose. In 2014, he released a statement claiming the results showed mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown in any human, primate, or previously sequenced animal, suggesting, in his interpretation, a new humanoid species or alien hybrid. His claims were not published in any peer-reviewed scientific journal. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the Paracas skulls exhibit two morphologically distinct types. The majority show a single enlarged parietal plate at the rear of the skull, consistent with intentional deformation, which compresses the skull front to back and forces the parietal bones to expand backward and upward as a single unit. A minority of specimens show elongation with an apparently retained sagittal suture, the division between two parietal plates, which some researchers argue is inconsistent with deformation and may reflect a genetic variation, producing naturally elongated cranial form within the Paracas population. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of cranial volume. In some Paracas specimens has been measured at up to 25% larger than the average modern human skull. Intentional deformation does not increase total cranial volume. It reshapes the skull without adding material. If the volume measurement is accurate for specimens where deformation alone cannot account for the size, this would suggest either exceptional natural cranial capacity within the Paracas genetic lineage or a genetic trait producing macrocephaly alongside natural elongation. This remains one of the genuinely unresolved questions in Paracas physical anthropology. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The National Museum of Archaeology, Anthropology, and History of Peru in Lima holds the majority of the Paracas skull collection. Scientific access to the specimens for genetic analysis requires institutional approval from Peruvian cultural heritage authorities. Legitimate DNA studies of Paracas material have been conducted using samples held within Peru under proper authorization, and their results differ markedly from the claims made by Foerster based on his anonymous laboratory analysis. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Paracas skulls, elongated heads with different DNA to any known human group. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Brien Foerster and the late Lloyd Pye argued that the Paracas skull DNA results indicated an unknown humanoid species or alien-human hybrid, a claim based exclusively on anonymous laboratory results that have not been published in any peer-reviewed scientific venue, reviewed by independent geneticists, or reproduced by any credentialed research group. The claim has been rejected by every archaeologist, geneticist, and physical anthropologist who has examined the Paracas material through legitimate scientific channels. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that intentional cranial deformation from birth accounts for the majority of elongated Paracas skulls and is the mainstream archaeological explanation. The practice is well documented in Andean cultures and produces exactly the skull morphology seen in most Paracas specimens: a single enlarged parietal plate without the sagittal suture that would be present in a natural two-plate skull. Deformation cannot increase cranial volume, which is why the volume question remains a point of legitimate scientific discussion separate from the alien hypothesis. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that genetic variation within the human Paracas population may account for a subset of skulls showing natural cranial elongation alongside or independent of intentional deformation. Natural macrocephaly and dolichocephaly are known human genetic variants. If some Paracas individuals carried genetic traits producing naturally elongated and larger skulls, intentional deformation applied from infancy would have amplified an already distinctive cranial form, producing the most extreme examples in the collection. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Paracas skulls, elongated heads with different DNA to any known human group, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes legitimate Paracas DNA studies conducted by researchers with access to properly curated museum specimens, including analysis supported by National Geographic, have consistently confirmed that the Paracas people are fully human with Native American genetic ancestry consistent with other Andean populations. No alien, unknown species, or non-human genetic material has been identified by any analysis conducted under verifiable scientific conditions. Foerster's anonymous laboratory results cannot be assessed, reproduced, or peer-reviewed. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Physical analysis of skull morphology demonstrates that the majority of Paracas specimens show a single enlarged parietal plate rather than two parietal plates with a sagittal suture. A naturally elongated human skull retains the sagittal suture between two parietal bones. The single-plate morphology is the defining anatomical signature of intentional deformation and is consistent across most of the Paracas collection. The minority of specimens that may retain suture lines warrant further analysis but do not require a non-human explanation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed no credentialed geneticist, physical anthropologist, or archaeologist working within peer-reviewed science has published findings supporting the alien or unknown species interpretation of the Paracas skulls. Foerster's claims have circulated extensively in fringe publications and YouTube documentaries, but have never appeared in a scientific journal. The absence of peer-reviewed support is not itself proof of conspiracy. It reflects the fact that the underlying evidence, anonymous lab, results from an unidentified facility, cannot be evaluated by the scientific community. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Paracas skulls, elongated heads with different DNA to any known human group. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past, with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Peer-reviewed DNA studies confirm that the Paracas people are fully human Native Americans with Andean genetic ancestry. Foerster's claims are not accepted by archaeology or genetics. Intentional skull deformation was a genuine cultural practice with documented social and ceremonial meaning in the Paracas world. Some skulls may show genetic elongation within human variation. This is a legitimate open question that does not require an alien explanation. The genuine Paracas culture, its extraordinary textiles, its sophisticated mummification practices, and its connection to the Nazca geoglyph tradition that followed, is remarkable enough to sustain serious scholarly interest without recourse to fabricated mysteries. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Paracas skulls, elongated heads with different DNA to any known human group, from the historical record through physical evidence across the competing theories and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Paracas skulls ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.